Welcome to the American Reading Company Voices from the Field. This is our webinar series where we bring in existing practitioners of ARC materials and resources to share how they're connecting to what's going on in the real world. So today we are so excited to be talking about building knowledge in our classrooms and school districts. And we have an esteemed group that is just ready to go and ready to share what they're learning and collaborating with their schools on. I am Megan Maloney. I am the Chief Academic Officer at American Reading Company, and I have had the privilege to be in both of the school districts that we are talking about today, as well as I've had the opportunity to co-facilitate a conversation with Dr. Scott in the past. So always looking forward to these types of opportunities. We're going to get started. And I want to introduce you to our first school district of the city of Beloit in Wisconsin. And Anthony, Mr. Bosco, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Megan and attendees. My name is Anthony Bosco. I'm the Director of Instructional Leadership and Equity for the School District Beloit in Beloit, Wisconsin. And I work out of the central office supporting implementation in our 6 elementary schools.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Molly Fehrenbach-Nichols. I'm a literacy coach in the school district of Beloit, and I currently work at Gaston Elementary.
Thank you, Beloit. And our other district we're highlighting and learning from today is Saratoga City Schools in New York. Dr. Davis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Davis. I'm the principal at Greenfield Elementary School. Greenfield is one of the 6 elementaries that are in the Saratoga Springs City School District.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Guthrie. I am a 2nd grade teacher at Greenfield Elementary in the Saratoga Springs City School District.
So we are really excited to get this conversation underway. We are from the classroom level perspective with the teacher, to the literacy coach perspective, to the principal's perspective, to the district level perspective. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce everyone to Dr. Irvin Scott, who is currently working at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. But prior to his work at Harvard, Dr. Scott has been in many a school, many a district, from a classroom teacher to a district leader to a chief academic officer, and also has done some work in the nonprofit arena with the Gates Foundation. He is a member of our advisory board and just such a wealth of support as well as expertise. So we're looking forward to today, and I will hand this over to you, Dr. Scott.
Thank you very much, Megan. I really appreciate that introduction. It's great to see everyone. Thank you, first of all, to our panelists who we will jump into this conversation with in just a minute, as well as our guest. It is such an important conversation for us to be having at this time with respect to the science of reading, with respect to quality curriculum, in this case, knowledge building curriculum, with respect to programming in schools that ultimately we're hoping will transform the learning experiences for students and teachers. I always say to my current students at Harvard who are aspiring to lead in schools, aspiring to lead in school districts and nonprofits and state agencies, it's hard to get to students without getting to adults first. In order for you to get to students and impact their lives, you have to be working with adults very deliberately and strategically. And so in the end, these conversations are about both of those, right? How do we have, how do we take advantage of opportunities to transform the lives of students by working with adults at various levels. So let's jump right into the conversation. I'm excited about having this conversation with our colleagues. And the first question I'm just going to put out there is, what made you, as a district leader, as a principal, as a coach, whatever perspective you have, and it is wonderful that we have all perspectives, what made you decide, or how did you come to the place where you said, as a school, and we'll start with Saratoga, New York, We need a knowledge building curriculum grounded in science of reading. That's a lot of technical jargon words, but how did you come to the conclusion that, you know what, we need a better literacy program in our district? Who wants to start us off?
I can start.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So when, so this is back 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, we had a need in our district that because we had a primary curriculum and an intermediate curriculum, and they were not the same. And one of the issues that we're finding with both of them, besides the fact that they weren't connected, was that there wasn't a strong focus on writing. So our district put together a cross-school committee where the teachers really came up with a philosophy or vision of what they wanted in a curriculum. And, 3 years ago, it was really not pre-science of reading, but pre-focus on the science of reading. And what they generated in their vision was that they wanted a curriculum that focused on phonics, that had a phonics instruction that was systematic and explicit, but we also wanted a strong focus on writing at the same time. And when that just naturally became the focus because of the audit that we had done on our curriculum and the materials that we're using. And then the knowledge building piece really came out of the exploration of the different programs that were out there. And some of our staff went and visited a school that was using American Reading Company. And once they had done that, their eyes and focus were all on the amount of research that was happening in the classrooms that they saw, and they saw the power of knowledge. And so it just kind of organically it kind of fell into the knowledge building arena. And I think, Carrie, as a classroom teacher, can tell probably a little bit more from a primary perspective of what kind of led us to looking at a curriculum that was a little bit more well-versed in establishing all facets of a child's literacy skills.
Yeah, awesome. Why don't you pick it up, Carrie? Thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for kicking us off.
Well, I wasn't on the committee that was picking the new curriculum, but what we were noticing within our classrooms is our students were very good at reading decodable texts, but it was not translating into assessments that we were giving or students moving on to the upper grades. They were having to read authentic texts and answer questions about them. American Reading Company allowed us to be able to give them authentic texts that are at their level. All the students will be researching certain topics of their choice, which was very helpful. We saw engagement amongst the students in that first year, being able to pick and choose topics of their own and readers of their own. And it also had the facet of the toolkits where we could target instruction and go over those phonics patterns that they were struggling with. So this program really encompassed everything that we needed moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm hearing several things there in summary. One is the focus on writing, which Dr. Davis said that she saw a gap. The district saw a gap in that. This point around beginning to understand knowledge building curriculum as a part of the art curriculum was also really important, especially, I hope you caught this, guests, as they visited other schools that were doing implementation, right? And so in some ways, it was a revelation that there is this sort of knowledge building component within the art curriculum as they visited other schools. And then Carrie also talking about the importance of decodable text, and also seeing that there was a gap in the students doing really well in that, but not necessarily that showing up in assessments, and feeling like there was a need to sort of go to another level around that. Great kicking us off, Dr. Davis and Carrie. Anthony or Molly, you want to jump in from your perspective in Beloit, Wisconsin? What prompted you guys to say we need to move in a different direction?
I think some similarities in terms of our desire to really look at our elementary literacy resource from a data perspective and understanding what challenges and opportunities we had with the resource that we had at the time. The other thing that the school district of Beloit has is a dual language immersion program. And for a good number of years, we were using two different resources, one on the monolingual side and one on the dual language side. Were really kind of competing interests, to be quite honest with you, in terms of how our PLCs operated, that data that we were looking at, and not necessarily having common formative assessments to really analyze student growth across the entire system. And then also, at the time, really doing some research on what was out there in terms of highly rated curriculum materials. We're a part of a statewide grant here in Wisconsin to look at high quality instructional materials. And so we developed some background about what we were looking for in those resources. And I think finally, something that we did as we explored pilots was empathy group work, where we actually spent time with stakeholders to get a better sense from our community, and not just our school community, parents, teachers, administrators, family, students, but also community partners, different organizations in town, folks that we could talk to about what we wanted literacy in Beloit, Wisconsin to be all about. And that really helped us identify the strengths that came out of this knowledge building curriculum, as well as our need as a district to really press into foundational skills and some of the things that our previous resource was lacking in that regard. But I'll let the expert Molly talk more, because she really is a gem. So
thank you, Anthony.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, but I really appreciate being part of this conversation today. So thank you for inviting the school district of Beloit. So as Tony mentioned, I think those empathy groups were really key in helping us to identify that American Reading Company was going to be the resource that we finally selected during our piloting process. And a couple of the emerging themes that came out across the empathy groups was around needing a curriculum that did support strong foundational skills and standards. And American Reading Company provides educators with so many tools to not only teach those things, but to assess those things, to really critically determine what are the areas of strength for a student and what are the opportunities for growth. Like, what is the next step for that student through the use of the ERLA, through the toolkits. And then as well as incorporating those foundational skills into the universal curriculum as well. Another emerging theme was about groups really wanted to select a curriculum that had a strong home and school literacy partnership. So we have really fully embraced the 100-book reading challenge in our school district, and the students are loving the books. The parents are commenting about how great they are. So we really now feel like we have some tools to put in the hands of kids, that they have access to high quality materials on a really regular basis. And then also tools to support the families in that work, sending home skills cards, so that there's really a strong home and school connection where parents have an understanding of what their student is working on here at school, and then can continue to support that work at home. All families can do that. And then finally, I guess one of the major themes identified by all of those empathy groups was really wanting to promote a joy of reading, as well as a literacy identity. Like, we want to build the culture that our kids are readers and writers and thinkers. And so that the engaging materials and the content really hooks the children into wanting to read and learning and growing just their understanding and their background knowledge. It's contagious. They want more and more. They have this thirst for learning right now. And they see themselves as readers and writers, researchers and thinkers.
Wonderful. Thank you, Molly and Anthony. Before I get to the next question, just a couple of summary points. I won't do this all for the entire panel discussion, but I just want to elevate a few points for our listeners. One is this point around PLCs and common assessments. And the fact that it sounded like you guys in your district, there were two different curriculum, or there were two ways of going at this issue, which created some incoherence. And so different PLCs having different language, doing things differently, not having a common assessment. So this was a way to sort of get on the same page, which to me was also critically important, if I'm hearing you correctly, in that you had this dual language immersion program. And so making sure that you had sort of a common language to support kids across the districts is important. The other thing that Anthony mentioned was a grant, if I heard you correctly, which I think is a really important point, because oftentimes we get funding into our schools and we're not always as strategic around how to use that funding to connect to something like this that's really needed. Now, this grant, if I heard you correctly, was about high quality curricula. And so it fed in nicely to supporting art. So that's another thing for our guests to be thinking about. What are the dollars that are coming into your district to help you that you could use to more strategically leverage those dollars for this effort? And then the final thing is this empathy group work, which if I heard you correctly, was actually working with stakeholders, parents and community members on the ground around what they might need or what the district could do to support them. That's really powerful. On a personal level, I just taught a case last night to like 60 kids. Well, they're not kids, they're adults, but 60 adults, aspiring leaders. And the case was on engaging parents and communities more intentionally. And so that's what you guys are doing. Let me ask you this question. I'm gonna kick it off. Molly, you sort of moved in this direction. When you began to talk about what it looks like on the ground, just talk a little bit about if a person, one of our guests, was to go into a classroom, what might they see that's a little different from what you might see in using other curriculum? And I'll have our Carrie and Tina do the same thing.
Sure, that's a great question. So just in observation and conversation with staff and students, we're seeing much more student involvement with American Reading Company curricula than our previous curriculum. Kids are actively reading, writing, and talking about books and content. One of the big components we're seeing is students flexibly choosing their books, and they're not limited by a level. So we're seeing really increased engagement in reading and actual like eyes on print reading. And we think that probably stems from some choice in addition to the high quality materials. From a literacy coach perspective, we're seeing teachers supporting students to build a common knowledge base. We know kids come to school with a variety of different experiences, and it had previously felt like our curriculum had sort of assumed that those students had that background knowledge or the information or had those experiences. And now we feel like we're better able to meet our kids' needs right where they are. So for example, like when kids come to school in kindergarten, they might have some understanding about fish. So they might know that fish live in the water. While other students might understand that fish breathe through gills. Well, then the teacher's able to develop some other additional background knowledge pieces through a mentor text reading, through independent reading, through conversation and accountable talk. And they grow some ideas around their bodies are covered with scales, and they're developing vocabulary in this really engaging way. And exposing them to that background knowledge that then enhances their vocabulary. So we're seeing and hearing lots of reading, lots of talking, lots of engaging conversation too as well. And we're finding that our kids are then willing to approach and attack more difficult text because they have some confidence with that background knowledge and that vocabulary.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Carrie, why don't you jump in? We'll stay at the classroom level. Then I'll come up and pan out at this sort of district level with Dr. Davis and Anthony. And what do you guys see also?
I would say engagement has increased tremendously over the last 3 years of this program. Our students are reading 30 minutes during the school day in independent books that they've chosen at various levels. And then they are asked to read 30 minutes every night at home. So the hours worth of reading practice they're getting during the day, it's at their independent level. It's books that they enjoy. They're very willing to pick up a text and attack it. We're also providing them with the tools that they need to attack words that are unfamiliar to them. The phonics component of the ARC program is fantastic. It teaches kids to look for familiar parts, find the power words, separate the words out into chunks in order to spell them. Just skills that they absolutely need to know in order to grow as a reader and a writer. Today I was teaching about prefixes and how prefixes change the meaning of the words. It's amazing to see them be able to take these big words that are 3-4 syllables and know, hey, I put a re at the beginning, it means do it again. They're excited, and they're all on an equal playing field. I remember when I was growing up, reading groups were separated into like the bluebirds and then the owls, and everybody knew where you were based on what group you're in. Our groups are flexible. We do board practice with spelling. I can see which kids need support with which skills. I might pull a green student that is reading at a kindergarten level with a kid that's reading at a white level, and we're working on the same skill. It's targeted, and they're part of our community. Nobody is better than anybody else. We're all working on what we need in order to grow and improve. And I'm in a special spot because second grade's really that last year where they're learning to read. Going into third grade, it's now read to learn. So we're providing them with those skills so that they can make that transfer seamlessly into third grade and beyond.
I love those details that Molly and Carrie are sharing at sort of on the ground level, because that's where the work is happening. I mean, when I was in the district leadership, I was helping to make it happen, but on the ground, Carrie and Molly supporting teachers is where it was happening. Megan, you had your hand up. Did you want to jump in with a question?
I did. There's just a question in the chat from a principal of a K-4 building asking exactly what Molly and Carrie are speaking about in terms of the primary grades and the demands of a kind of content-rich curriculum. And I guess my wondering here to support this question is, were your teachers ready for this on day one? Or how did you build their stamina to be able to think, yes, my students can do this in kindergarten, in first grade or second grade? Molly, Carrie, could you add to that?
Yeah, the one thing I want everybody to walk away knowing is this program is very holistic. The curriculum that is given to us is a skeleton, and it is up to us to put all the details on there that fit our class. We are using the same graphic organizers as the grades that are above us, and the grades below us are using the same. We're following the same format from year to year to year. And every year your students will take you to different places. My first year, we tried to fill in every box on a graphic organizer or do every little bit of what was suggested within the curriculum. At this point in year 3, it's amazing where they're taking us, and they're taking us to places where as a professional I wouldn't have gone, but it's perfectly okay. We're really meeting them where they're at. So when it comes to the writing piece, we do a morning meeting where we share, and that generally flows right into what we're writing about. And I have students where I'm like, okay, you're going to write 2 sentences. You're going to draw a picture. You're going to write 1 word. We meet them where they're at, and then we support them moving forward. So it's celebrating their abilities and then building on those abilities. So it's really, it's flipping the script. Instead of making corrections and looking at the things we have to do better on, we really have to uplift those kids so that they're excited to write, they're excited to read, and they're not afraid to make mistakes, because that's where the best learning comes from.
I'll just piggyback off of that. I agree with everything Carrie said. And I do think that probably our primary teachers often feel pressure, right, to make sure that those foundational skills are in place. And the beauty of what we have found and discovered through American Reading Company is that we are still doing those things, really having strong foundational skill instruction around phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics, but it's embedded in a rich and engaging content and context. So it's the vehicle with which we are addressing those foundational skills, and in really meaningfully engaging ways around building that background knowledge, reading and writing about content that is important and interesting to the kids. So I couldn't agree more with around using those materials and seeing that increased engagement. On a side note, when our kindergartners were studying insects, and they were at the topic of the week was spiders, and I walked into a kindergarten classroom. I love to tell the story, it's my favorite one. And a student said to me, well, do you suppose the spider has a cephalothorax or not, Ms. Fehrenbach? And so we're 5-year-olds engaging in the work and using that kind of rich vocabulary that I would never have seen in our previous curriculum.
Love that. Love that story. Yeah. So anyone who's wondering whether the rigor is there, a word that we use a lot, or whether the academic press is there, these are examples of it being there. Another thing I heard in that question, I'm oppose it to Dr. Davis and Anthony, is so when you're implementing anything new in a district, not everyone is going to be in the same place. Not all the adults are going to be in the same place. So Dr. Davis and Anthony, maybe you can talk a little bit about how did you at the district level or at the school level bring adults along to make sure that they were ready to implement this curriculum. We use the word fidelity too much in education, but as successfully as you can, given the fact that not everyone's where Carrie or Molly might be. Won't you kick us off, Dr. Davis, and then we'll go to Anthony. How do you bring the adults along in the school in the district?
Well, in our case, and it sounds like in Wisconsin, the same thing was that there was a need, and everyone knew there was a need. Like, Carrie had mentioned her kids were great decoders, but it didn't transfer to authentic text. So our teachers were clamoring for something that because they wanted their children to want to read and be engaged in reading, and yet they didn't see the transfer from decodable to just spontaneous text, so authentic text. When this program was introduced to us, the other thing that the teachers really wanted was writing. And so once the program was introduced and the teachers saw how much writing the students were doing, that was an inspiring component, because the teachers knew they needed their children to be needed to write more. But to your point about how do we know when staff is ready, it goes, I think that it's daunting anytime we do something new. And I would say my word for ARC is it's robust. It's almost like a college text, and Carrie explained it really well. ARC gives us a framework and a lot of background, and the manual itself is professional development, right? Like, as you're going through it, you're trying to understand the process of research and the way that you bring a research project together. So the folks, it was daunting, and it was hard, but what kept them going, and I think this was probably a nice, powerful move that everyone would use, is to celebrate the wins and what they're seeing children do. And when we first started this, and I say this out loud and on on a webinar, I was not thinking ARC was going to work. I was shaking my head. I was like, no way. That, you know, they're going to just rewriting this much in kindergarten. And I was even saying, honestly, out loud, that this isn't respectful of our students who need support. And I remember walking through the hallway and seeing the kindergartners writing, and they had paragraphs and these pictures that were so complex. And I said, how did they do that? And the kindergarten teacher I was talking to said, they just did it. And I was floored. And so we started to see those kinds of things, and we started just pointing out the successes that were happening. And once we started to get that momentum, it just kept us going. And like, for instance, we had parent-teacher conferences in the fall, and teachers were saying, my gosh, the parents are coming back and saying how engaged the children are in reading, like they didn't have to beg them to take out a text to read. And so that was motivating for teachers. And then the excitement when you walk into a room, like Molly had said, and a child is asked to use these questions. And I have a similar story, Molly, but I can't even remember the word that the student was using. It was the butterflies and the thing that they used to take the nectar out of the flowers. And the children were all talking about this thing that butterflies have. And the language that they were using and the engagement, how excited they were to find out more information about butterflies was just, I think on that particular day, I had goosebumps. Like this was an inclusion classroom with students who had special needs, and they were all engaged. So it's celebrating those small wins, but also not just the wins, but the good things that you're seeing, and reminding folks of what they wanted and what we're getting from the new program. And then the question that was up in the question about whether or not the principal said if content was too much for the primary kids. I can promise you the content is not the lift. The content is the draw, and that is what gets them in the book. The other thing I think Molly was saying about, you teach them this new information and then they use it, right? And it reminds me of what we say: if we teach it, they learn it. And that makes, when we're using a knowledge building curriculum, that is equitable, right? So if we're not teaching it, they might not be learning it. And so therefore we have an achievement gap, because assessments are measuring students on things that they may not have been taught. And so when we use a knowledge building curriculum, children learn what we teach them, and we level the playing field when they're going to access text. So to answer the teacher's questions who have concerns, it's not the content that will be the heavy lift.
That's awesome. First of all, I just want to say, I want all of you guys to come help me teach my aspiring leaders class here at Harvard. I mean, you are just hitting the nail on the head around so many different things. Dr. Davis, your point around whether you, from the beginning, you felt like students could do it. I think that's a natural inclination that educators often have. Can they? And so, first of all, just being transparent about that, I think is, I think that's wonderful. The other thing, this point around content is not the lift, content is the draw. And then you talked about equity issues. If we don't teach it, how can we expect them to learn it and know it? And that's what it's showing up on the assessments. It's just really, really important. And I think finally, and I'll go to Anthony, from a district or from a school perspective, even if there were doubts, as there are oftentimes in adults' minds, around whether something can happen. You also show that it's important to move forward despite those doubts, because what's going to transform people's experience will only be if you implement something and they see a different result, right? Which is what you guys actually did. You implemented it, you provided support, and then people begin to see results, including parents. And that just changed everyone's mindset. Anthony, how would you like to add to this conversation at the district level?
I think that whole kind of concept of implementation science is really something that we focus on, because through our pilot processes, we were really able to kind of build a critical mass of understanding of where the staff, where the community, where they were in terms of what we wanted moving forward with the literacy resource. But that was just really the first step. I think, the question about when do we know the teachers are ready, that is an ongoing process. We look at implementation in 3 to 5, 5 to 7 year windows, and really understanding that the things that we build into our system in terms of support, in terms of the braids between our PLCs, our professional learning, the site-based work that ARC, the American Reading Company, comes and does with building level teams, making sure that our building administrators through the Leadership Learning Series have a good understanding of the framework, because it really does take a team and a lot of clarity to completely understand the framework. And again, we're in year 3 and we're still building. We're all maybe struggling with staffing issues and such. So we're even looking at how do we onboard and continue to bring folks in as they are new to ARC, as they join our district or go from, to departmentalized to straight elementary model. And then our coaching model in Beloit, I think, is somewhat unique in terms of each one of our elementary schools has a literacy coach and a biliteracy coach, and they work together to really kind of wrap around the framework and implementation to make sure that every individual practitioner, every grade level, is really getting that just-in-time support that they need, because teams will be at different places in their evolution as far as that Integris implementation. We don't like Fidelity either. And with that Integris implementation and just doing the best we can through the data and looking at the key metrics dashboard, some of those things to see where some of those areas of support might be, that really helps us work a little bit more strategically in service to our teachers and our students.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So you heard implementation science, right? So not just moving forward, we're going to implement it, we're going to do it. No, we're going to do it strategically, including piloting it potentially, right? I think I heard you say that, Anthony. We learn by implementing it through a pilot, step back, learn from it, feedback, and then move forward to the next level. Really, really critical. That's just, so it doesn't just happen. No matter how great the curriculum is, ARC can be phenomenal, but if a district is not strategic and thoughtful about its implementation, you can run into challenges. Okay, let's step back and talk a little bit about professional learning and just spend a few minutes just on professional learning. And anyone can jump in with this. Maybe we'll start with you, Carrie. Okay, if a teacher's on here or a principal's on here, a district leader's on here, give them a snapshot of what it means to have professional development happen in a way that builds your skills in implementing ARC curriculum. Start with you, Carrie, and then we'll go to Molly.
Well, the first thing I would highly suggest is having some time with your team to unpack ARC. And I don't mean physically unpack ARC, that's a whole other thing. But Tina was very gracious to myself and my team and gave us a day to spend with each unit to really delve into the curriculum, the materials that went along with the curriculum. My colleague Pam and I are really big into trying to really dig into the curriculum and learn what it's expecting. We needed that time. We needed to bounce ideas off of each other. We needed to do that. So if you are a school that's considering this program, that is extremely important. I also feel that moving forward, we always have new teachers being hired. There needs to be somebody within the district that can provide the support that those teachers need, because we're not always going to have an ARC professional that comes to us after a while. We enjoyed our time with our ARC consultant who worked with us, and she was always there to provide support when we needed it. So I think that's extremely important. As a PLC and a collaborative team, we spend a morning every week looking at what we've been doing, how we're going to alter it as we move forward. And we've come up with some pretty creative ideas over the past couple of years. With our bug unit, we do projects at the end of every week that go along with the content question. And we put together a bug museum last year and invited the parents in, and it was fantastic. Our kids leave us saying that they're published authors, and they've written books. It's amazing. But I really do feel like school districts need to have that support after the first couple of years to make sure that everybody coming in is on the same playing field.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm hearing not only on opportunity to understand the curriculum, but also opportunity, if you guys are hearing Carrie's point closely, opportunity to shape it yourselves as a group of teachers, right? Not just taking something off the shelf and just implementing it, but how do we make it our own? And Dr. Davis gives Carrie and her team some time to do that, right? So we're going to give you a day. That takes resources. That takes a commitment from leadership to say, go off and work on your own together. It doesn't just happen, but that is a part of learning how to implement it and taking ownership of that curriculum. Molly, why don't you pick us up there?
Sure. I love all those great ideas. So I guess there's kind of a twofold approach when I'm thinking about like supporting professional learning. The school district of Beloit has been able to work really closely with American Reading Company coaches. And if you're able to do that, it's a really great experience. As a matter of fact, today we're participating in learning walks at one of our elementary schools supported by one of the American Reading coaches, where we're able to go into classrooms and have some conversations during the debrief about what were the powerful moves that we're seeing that the teachers are using, and what would be some potential moves that we as literacy coaches here in the school district of Beloit can support our staff with. So we were fortunate enough as through the grant to be able to provide our staff with a lot of professional development from American Reading Company, and they've been great. So in year one, we really focused on using the IRLA and identifying baseline information. We talked about literacy block structures and universal supports. And then in year two, we continued that work specifically in our buildings, but then internally we were able to use the resources to develop our own professional learning, because the resources are so rich and really grounded in the science of reading. So we dug a little deeper into the color levels of the IRLA so that our teachers would be able to then use that information so that when they're teaching in the universal classroom, that they can reach a variety of needs, drawing into lots of different levels of strategies and skills as well. And then I think through our PLC process, we're doing a lot of professional learning there. In terms of like improvement science, we are using our data from the IRLA to identify students who could maybe benefit from some additional supports and sharing some strategies. So we're building some collective efficacy through that whole PLC process, and then sharing out those successes with our staff. So I guess to piggyback a little bit about what Carrie said, it is pretty daunting and overwhelming. It is a holistic curriculum, but that to take it in small bites and set some small goals. So implement one piece and then continue that piece and then add another, and set a goal to really like focus your work on that for the next few weeks, and then layer on something else. And I think celebrating the successes is really important, really important.
Thank you so much. Small bites, small goals, celebrating successes, implementing thoughtfully. Megan, go ahead, and then Dr. Davis.
I just want to acknowledge that Michelle Whitley has joined us as well from Saratoga City Schools, the director of curriculum. Had a little delay in joining us, but thank you for joining. And I saw her coming off mute a few times, and I think she might have something to add, Dr. Scott.
You go right ahead. Good to have you, Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I appreciate it. I'm just so energized by listening to Dr. Davis and Carrie talk about the programs at Saratoga. And when you talk about the professional development piece, being the district oversight, I needed a lot of support in terms of the implementation of this program, not only to ordering materials, to professional development in terms of instruction, a pragmatic approach to implement the program across 6 buildings. Was really important to have that support because I was getting to know it myself as well. And then working with all of our principals too. And I have to tell you, I felt and continue to feel very supported in the direction that we need to go. It's different at each building, working to personalize what we need to do across the district. With adult learners, you have different populations of people learn in different ways. We also work as an administrative team through a learning leadership series where we have a coach come to our administrative team and work with all 10 of us. Our superintendent sometimes joins, our assistant superintendent, our business office, just depending on what our topic is. But I spend a lot of time with the coaches for professional development planning for what's going to happen next at the buildings and getting feedback. And I think that the professional development not only supports and teaches the leaders who need to roll out the implementation and follow up, but also provides a layer of support that I haven't experienced before in implementing programs. So if I have a question regarding ARC and I try and compile them, but I have 2 to 3 people to reach out to and they're getting back to me, within that day to help me navigate next steps or questions. And as we continue to move into year 3 of our implementation, we're continuing to build a stronger foundation. Now we're personalizing the coaching to be more elbow to elbow or PLC, but we have those conversations and they come with ideas. Well, you could try this, this, and this. And then we're kind of talking with our principles of how we promote consistency and what our teachers need. And also to be able to have that rapport and trust to personalize, to be in a teacher's classroom and to help them with resources. Our coach recently came a couple of weeks ago and we've expanded the digital resources that are available in our district. And just having PLCs, having 30 to 45 minutes with her to go through, look at the resources, this is how you get them, and then follow up with the how-to. Huge support for not only our principals, myself, but for our teachers to have that access. So I guess my point is that the experience is more personalized than I've experienced in the past 20 years in terms of an implementation of a program. And I always have the support I need as a leader to follow through with all of our faculty and staff.
So rich. Thank you, Michelle. What I hear and what Michelle is saying is a real partnership between the district, between our curriculum people, in order for implementation to happen thoughtfully, strategically. Someone put up a question real quick as Michelle was sharing, because you were talking about coaches, and I wondered if this is a question more for Megan, because the person said, how do you find coaches to provide support? And when I hear that, I think of 2 different types of coaches. There are coaches, literacy coach, Molly's a literacy coach in the district. And the question could be, well, how do you find coaches like that? I think the person's asking about coaches from a curriculum standpoint, from ARC standpoint, but both are really good questions. Megan, you want to pick that up and then we'll go to Tina and Carrie.
Absolutely. So American Reading Company with ARC Core provides the high quality curriculum, but we know that alone is not enough. So we really have a focus on the professional learning to support not just the curriculum, but to support how to implement a high quality curriculum and knowledge building curriculum. So at American Reading Company, we provide our executive ARC coaches. And as you've heard, we have classroom supports, we have principal supports. We go in and are shoulder to shoulder, hand to hand, with modeling, with lesson planning, with co-facilitating a lesson, as well as looking at data. So American Reading Company, yes, sells the curriculum, but we also have the supports to help the classroom teacher, to the principal, to the district. I heard a little bit ago, someone mentioned LLS. So LLS stands for Leadership Learning Series. So we work with our administrators, we look at data, we look at change ideas, and we're really looking at ways in which we can utilize the high quality curriculum to its fullest, and also be looking at how we're going to be developing teachers and leaders so that they're best supporting their students.
Wonderful. I've had the experience, the pleasure of actually seeing some of that on the ground classroom coaching happening actually in Rhode Island, Providence. It's actually been a couple of years ago. But I've seen firsthand what that coaching looks like. Really important to make sure you understand what that looks like from an ARC perspective. Dr. Davis, then Carrie, and then I'm going to have you answer sort of a summary question. It's been a rich conversation, and I really love that you guys took it in the direction that was most relevant for you and your systems. But Dr. Davis, why don't you go ahead?
And thank you. Dr. Whitley really took a lot of what I wanted to say, which is the coaching helps us as leaders as well. Let's be honest, although teaching and learning is our fundamental purpose in schools, it's not always the fire that's burning. So I found that our coach kept me focused and kept the pace. And that I say the pace is so important, because I got to tell you, there were days when I was like, I cannot believe I have another coaching day. And I was just catching my breath from, other things that were happening. But it's so grateful. I am really grateful that the pace kept me focused and kept us going and moving in the right direction. And I think even teachers were a little tired, it was a lot to just keeping us going and keeping us focused on the goal. And as a building principal, we're kind of like, we're lonely. We don't have a lot of people to bounce things off of. And I found my coach helped me even make decisions that were from my building or, for our district, when she would give me like a guiding point. So if for instance, my favorite one is, she would say, the fundamental purpose of American Reading Company is to create engaged readers. So whenever I asked her a question, she would come back with that. And then she'd say, is what you're deciding going to build engagement or take away from engagement? Because the program, although it will work one way in one school and work another way in another school, we all have systems and structures that interrupt and do that, make the day not as smooth as we'd like. And whenever I had a tough decision, at first I'd think, I'm gonna take away the fidelity of the program if I make this change. And my coach would say, remember, are you taking away from engagement or building engagement? And when I use that as my guiding point, I was able to make decisions easy. And we can beat ourselves up a lot about what decisions we make and whether they're right or wrong. But having a coach kind of walking this path with me has, I don't think we would have been as successful as we have if I didn't have that person sort of sometimes pushing me from the back and sometimes dragging me from the front, right? But she did, and it kept us going. And I am really grateful because, like I said, it's not always the fire that's burning. And we, as building principals, there's lots to juggle, but our fundamental purpose is teaching and learning, and it kept me in the right direction.
Oh, that's rich. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. Carrie, before I give us our final question that I want to hear from each of the panelists on.
I love that ARC uses the word coach. And being an athlete myself, I remember my coaches saying, if you're not breaking a sweat, if it's easy, you're not pushing hard enough. And I want everybody to understand, like, in my 20 years of teaching, the curriculums that have been handed to me have more been teacher says this, student will say this. That is not this program. It's refreshing to get the freedom to be a professional back into my career. This program allows me to build my classroom the way that works for me, while bringing rigor and structure to the students so that they can achieve great things. So it's almost a cautionary thing. It's not going to be comfortable. It shouldn't be comfortable when you first do this. You're going to grow as a teacher. And I just know, being in this profession for so long, we're starting to see that shift back to teachers making these big decisions and going with that. So don't be afraid of the nervousness and the hard questions you're going to have to ask yourself day to day. It gets easier, and it's well worth it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carrie. In our last 4 minutes, because we want to make sure we end on time, I'll just ask each of our panelists, first of all, thank you so much. Phenomenal. I love that you went to a place. I have a ton of questions. We have a ton of questions. But what I really felt like we had today was a conversation where you were really driving that conversation around what this looks like on the ground, which is what our guests want to hear. But if there's one thing that you would like them to take away from this conversation around ARC implementation, around high quality curriculum, maybe we could just go around, do a quick whip around. What is that takeaway? I'll start with Anthony, and what's that takeaway you would love for them to take away?
I think, and it hasn't really been mentioned yet, but something I appreciate most about this framework and the American Reading Company is teacher and student agency. You know, this idea that teachers who are maybe not teachers of reading the way we would like them to be, and students who only understand reading improvement as reading more, the framework and the IRLA and the toolkits really give us a lot more agency on both sides to grow ourselves as teachers of reading and as of readers for our students.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anthony. Let's go to Dr. Davis.
I have so many things floating around my head. And what I said last year was writing. What I want to say this year is coherence. And I use that word because we have, and honestly, Carrie and her colleague Pam have really inspired me to think more about tier 2 interventions. And they have really shown me the importance of coherence, of not always doing something separate during tier 2. And when you have a knowledge building curriculum, we learn from the known to the unknown, right? And so when they have great content, they have student engaged, they take that engagement and that motivation and they apply an intervention. And that to me has been the most, I guess, inspiring thing for me to go to my next level of learning, which is how do we bring coherence when we're applying interventions or using interventions with students?
Coherence. Thank you. Michelle, what's the takeaway?
My takeaway, or maybe something that I just want to add that has been huge for me in working with this, is that our proficiency levels in literacy, despite the resources and efforts, we're not seeing the increase that we would expect to see. And as we got really looking into whether it be the science of reading or literacy instruction, what our models are, et cetera, I've learned so much from working with the company about knowledge building and about how children learn, and about the knowledge gap that we have and how that increases comprehension, not just teaching how to read. And this program has opened our eyes to equity in the classroom, what we're teaching, how we're teaching, and also provided our teachers with a strong framework and understanding of students' personalized needs. And it's also really increased collaboration. So my underscore and takeaway is the knowledge component, the knowledge building piece of it. And we have a lot more work to do around that. And I would encourage districts that are entering into this partnership to do a lot of work around that with their teachers prior to, implementation, because it'll make a lot more sense.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. Knowledge building, Carrie, and then Molly. Then I'll turn it over to Megan.
I'm going to piggyback on what Dr. Davis was saying. When it comes to tier 2 supports, I think the biggest thing for me was learning that it doesn't have to be a 15-20 minute small group around a table. Coaching can be a drive-by. It can be, I've noticed you're in your writing, you're missing this piece. You provide a tier 2 support right then and right there. So it's kind of being flexible in that thinking, and providing what they need in that moment. We all know that every day is a different day, and we have to become flexible in that ability to provide them the support in that moment. So I think the flexibility piece and that tier 2 support is my takeaway.
Wonderful. Tier 2 support and flexibility. Molly?
So I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a person who's hearing about American Reading Company for the very first time. And I'm sure after listening to us talk for the last 50 some minutes that it's got to feel very overwhelming. And what is your entry point? Where do you go next? What is your next step? And I guess I just want to revisit the idea about going slow to go fast, or going slow to go far, actually. And so that if you're interested in having further conversation about knowledge building curriculums or digging into this, and you go in this direction and you work with ARC, I just encourage you to think about doing it in small bites, and really thinking about it as opportunities for learning for your staff. I think when we first started, sometimes our staff would start to feel like, well, we're not doing this right, or we're not doing it the way ARC wants us to do. And rather than putting that pressure on ourselves, well, what do we want to do, and how are we using this resources, and where do we see the successes and opportunities for growth in our teacher? And I think framing it in that lens of opportunity for growth, not only for our students, but for our staff, does a better job of setting us up for some success with our implementation.
Going slow to go far. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Megan.
Yes, thank you all, Dr. Scott, Beloit, and Saratoga City Schools. The work that you're doing to build knowledge with your students and with your teachers is just amazing. Stay tuned. Those of you that have joined us today, we will be sure, those that want to see ARC Core in action in a school or district near you, we will be in touch with you. You will also get a copy of this recording. This is one I'm sure you're going to want to listen to a few times as you're thinking about adopting a new curriculum or supporting an existing curriculum that you may have. So thank you. We look forward to our next Voices from the Field, which will be in January. And also a reminder, thank you, team. We also will be having a webinar next month around multilingual learners and the science of reading. So please continue to follow us on social media, as well as attend our webinars, because we really look to be that partner in literacy and really looking to support you in your schools in the work that you're doing. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Great job.
Thank you.
Panelists.
Thank you, districts and schools.